When you think about Formula One, you really expect just, well, absolute precision.
Oh, without a doubt.
Right. Like you've got the most advanced engineering on the planet, telemetry that's measuring 1,000 data points every single second, and drivers who can hit an apex within millimeters just lap after lap.
It's the pinnacle of motorsport for a reason.
Exactly. It's an environment that is supposed to be perfectly calculated and utterly predictable.
Hmm.
But when you dive into the data coming out of the new 2026 engine regulations,
Yeah, that precision is just gone.
it's completely gone. We are looking at a scenario on track right now that is completely unpredictable. I mean, if you're watching from the grandstands next year, you're going to see things that defy the basic logic of motorsport.
You really are. And, the word crisis gets thrown around a lot in the paddock, but the current situation we're looking at is the absolute definition of a regulatory and engineering crisis.
Yeah, and we have the source material today to prove it. We've got a massive stack of highly technical F1 regulations. We're looking at telemetry data analyses, the financial rule books, and team statements about some really scary recent on-track incidents.
The telemetry data is especially eye-opening.
Oh, it's wild. So our mission today for this deep dive is to, cut through all the paddock rumors. We want to explain to you the exact technical and financial mechanisms behind this proposed 350 kilowatt super clipping fix.
Right. And more importantly, why fixing a massive safety flaw might actually bankrupt teams or, well, destroy the sport's entertainment value entirely.
Yeah, and to really grasp why there is genuine panic in the boardrooms right now, we have to look at the telemetry from the Suzuka circuit in Japan.
We have to put you right in the cockpit for this one.
Exactly. Let's put you in the car, going into the high-speed 130R in Spoon Corners. We had a situation recently where Haas driver Oliver Bierman came up behind Franco Colapinto's Alpine.
Right, and they are on a straightaway.
A straightaway. A section of track where every instinct, every rule of racing dictates you are completely flat on the throttle.
Just absolutely pinned.
Pinned. But suddenly, Bierman has to take extreme, violent, evasive action to avoid rear-ending Colapinto. I mean, Bierman slammed into the barriers. We were talking about a massive 50G impact.
And he thankfully walked away, which is a testament to the safety of the cars. But the telemetry from that specific incident is what set the paddock on fire.
Because it wasn't a mistake, right?
Exactly. The data proved unequivocally that this was not driver error. It wasn't a missed braking point, and Colapinto didn't, suddenly decide to brake test a competitor at top speed.
Which would be insane.
Right. The telemetry showed a 50 kilometer per hour or roughly 30 mile per hour speed differential between the two cars, and it was directly caused by the engine regulations.
That is just terrifying.
It is. Bierman's car was in a deployment phase, meaning his battery was dumping maximum electrical boost to the rear wheels. But Colapinto's car, which is entirely managed by the onboard software, had switched into a harvesting phase.
I mean, just imagine driving in the fast lane of a highway, right? You're doing 80 miles per hour, and the car in front of you suddenly drops to 45 miles per hour with absolutely no brake lights.
It's unthinkable in a road car, let alone an F1 car.
It's a literal safety time bomb. That's what the technical analysts in our sources are calling it. But the obvious question you have to ask is, why on earth would a race car do that on a straightaway?
Well, it comes down to a mechanical phenomenon called superclipping.
Superclipping.
Right. Under the new 2026 rules, a car can completely run out of electrical energy halfway down a long straight. But because the regulations mandate massive energy recovery over the course of a single lap, the car doesn't just, stop accelerating when the battery dies.
Like it would in the old days.
Exactly. Instead, it actively begins to harvest energy from the rear axle to recharge itself.
Hold on, I'm struggling with this. I mean, they have a $130 million engine budget. Are you seriously telling me they can't engineer a software patch that just lets the car coast when the battery dies?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah. Why do they have to harvest energy on the straight? Why not just harvest in the braking zones like they always have?
Because the math of the 2026 formula just doesn't allow it. The FIA mandated this radical shift to a roughly 50-50 power split between the internal combustion engine and the electrical energy recovery system.
Okay.
So to hit that electrical requirement, the kinetic generator on the rear axle, the MGUK, has to harvest a massive amount of energy. Braking zones alone just aren't long enough to recover what the battery is mandated to deploy.
Wow.
So halfway down the straight, the MGUK switches polarity. It turns from an electric motor pushing the car forward into a generator.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the physical sensation of that switch must be wild for the driver. It's not just a loss of power, right?
Yeah.
They don't just stop speeding up.
Oh, far from it. when that generator engages, it creates immense magnetic resistance. It acts like a very powerful physical brake on the rear axle.
Without the driver ever touching the brake pedal.
Exactly. So the car undergoes a sudden, massive deceleration, and that is where your 50-kilometer-per-hour speed differential comes from.
But wait, the internal combustion engine is still firing during all of this, right?
Yeah.
The driver's foot is pinned to the floor. How is the combustion engine not pushing the car forward and just overcoming that magnetic drag?
Now, that brings us to the most controversial technical mechanism of the 2026 rules. It's called ICE power diversion.
ICE, so internal combustion engine power diversion.
Right, because the MGUH, the part that used to use exhaust gases to generate electricity, was removed for 2026 to simplify the engines and attract new manufacturers.
Right, they wanted Audi and Ford to come in, so they made it simpler.
Exactly. But because they removed it, the rear axle has to do all the heavy lifting. So when the battery drains, the system software literally hijacks the mechanical power from the combustion engine.
Wait, it hijacks the engine.
Yes. It uses the engine's rotation to aggressively turn the generator and charge the battery, rather than sending that power to the wheels.
Oh my God. It's like pedaling a bicycle downhill, right? And you're picking up speed, but halfway down, someone forces a heavy dynamo onto your tire to power a headlight.
That's a perfect analogy.
Suddenly, you have to pedal twice as hard just to maintain the speed you already had, and if you can't, you just rapidly slow down. It feels entirely counterintuitive for a racing car.
It is entirely counterintuitive. I mean, you have the engine screaming at maximum RPM, you're burning fuel, but the car is physically slowing down on a straightaway.
Okay, so we have emergency summits happening between the teams and the FIA right now, heavily debating a technical solution known as the 350 kilowatt fix.
Right, the famous fix.
Yeah. From our sources, there are two main proposals on the table. The first is to force the software to equalize the harvesting. Basically, they would increase the superclipping harvesting threshold to 350 kilowatts so that everyone's car slows down at the same predictable rate.
Which would stop those massive speed differentials. If everyone slows down together, no one crashes into the back of anyone else. Right. And the second option being debated is to cut the maximum deployment output. Instead of allowing the battery to dump 350 kilowatts of power and drain itself halfway down the straight, they would cap deployment at, say, 250 or even 200 kilowatts.
So the battery drains slower, and ideally, it lasts until the actual braking zone.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because that second option feels like a terrible compromise for a sport obsessed with performance.
It really does.
I mean, it's like having a smartphone with a blindingly bright state-of-the-art screen. But the battery dies completely by 2 p.m. So the manufacturer's grand fix is a software update that forces everyone to use their phones on 10% brightness all day.
Yeah.
Sure, the battery lasts until bedtime, but you've completely ruined the experience of using the device.
The brightness analogy captures the dilemma perfectly. What's fascinating here is that these fixes address the symptom of the car slowing down, unpredictably, sure, but they fundamentally alter the energy dynamics of the lap.
Which changes the product.
Exactly. It changes the actual racing product the fans are paying good money to watch.
But wait, if turning down the battery power fixes the safety issue, why is anyone arguing against it? Just turn down the brightness, right? Diffuse the closing speed issue, stop the 50G crashes, and move on.
Yeah.
Plus, wouldn't it fix the massive complaints we are seeing about qualifying? I was reading that right now, to manage this battery drain, drivers are having to awkwardly lift and coast during what is supposed to be a sled-out qualifying lap.
Oh, the qualifying issue is huge.
They are lifting off the throttle hundreds of meters before a corner just to regenerate energy because the car can't survive a full push lap. It totally ruins the spectacle.
It strips away the very essence of a qualifying lap. A qualifying lap is supposed to be the ultimate expression of man and machine operating on the absolute limit of physics.
Right.
But the resistance to the brightness fix, as you called it, comes down to raw pace. If you reduce the electrical output to 250 or 200 kilowatts to save battery life, the cars get significantly slower.
How slow are we talking?
Well, our sources indicate a very real fear that dropping the electrical deployment risks bringing Formula One lap times dangerously close to Formula 2 levels,
Oh, wow.
which is a marketing nightmare.
Completely.
F1 brands itself as the pinnacle of motorsport. You simply cannot have multi-million-dollar hybrid prototypes running lap times that look identical to a junior spec series.
You'd lose the core audience overnight.
But if you drop the electrical power, couldn't the engineers just boost the internal combustion engine power to compensate? Like, just pump more fuel in and let the V6 do the talking?
In theory, yes, you could increase the fuel flow rate,
Hmm.
but an F1 engine is an incredibly tightly packaged ecosystem. The internal cooling systems, the radiators, the side pod
You're
aerodynamics.
all custom built?
Exactly. They were all designed for a very specific heat rejection threshold based on that original 50-50 power split.
Oh.
If you suddenly boost the internal combustion engine's output to compensate for a mandated drop in electrical power, you generate vastly more heat. The engines simply overheat. But look, if safety is truly the priority here, who cares if they are 3 or 4 seconds slower a lap? Or who cares if they have to open up the bodywork to cool the engine down?
The marketing teams care.
But shouldn't the driver's safety warnings override the marketing department's desire for speed? We are talking about preventing high-speed rear-end collisions.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where we have to shift our focus from the racetrack to the accounting department.
The spreadsheets.
Always the spreadsheets. The resistance to these changes isn't just about marketing pride or lap times. It is about the fact that Formula One literally cannot afford to change the engines right now due to strict, inescapable financial regulations.
I think as fans, we often look at this through an outdated lens. We sort of assume that if there's a problem, the smartest engineers in the world just pull an all-nighter at the factory, they machine a new part out of titanium, and they bolt it onto the car by Friday practice.
Yeah, that era of Formula One is dead and buried.
It's totally gone.
The hard reality governing everything right now is the dedicated $130 million power unit cost cap. And keep in mind, this is an entirely separate financial ledger from the team chassis cost cap.
Right.
The engine manufacturers, so Mercedes, Ferrari, Honda, Red Bull, Ford, Renault, they are legally bound by the spending limit. These 2026 engines are not prototypes waiting to be tinkered with. They are already designed, cast, validated on dynos, and locked into a fixed financial envelope.
Meaning the money's already gone.
Exactly.
They can't just redesign the combustion chamber or alter the compression ratio to compensate for a flaw in the FIA's battery rules. As our sources point out, changing internal components like pistons or connecting rods mid-cycle isn't just a simple software patch. It is a multi-million-dollar heart transplant.
A heart transplant is the perfect way to describe it.
Yeah.
And it's not just the money, it's the physics of time.
Right, you can't buy time.
No. Casting new engine blocks, validating those blocks on transient dynos to ensure they don't explode under race conditions, and passing FIA safety checks, all of that takes 6 to 8 months. The development pathways and the manufacturing runs were finalized months ago to fit under that $130 million ceiling.
But that creates a massive regulatory paradox. If a team is forced to redesign their engine to fix the governing body's own safety flaw, and doing so pushes them over the $130 million limit, are they going to be penalized for following a new safety directive?
That is the exact question keeping team principals awake at night.
Are we going to see championship points deducted because the manufacturers fixed a problem they didn't even create?
The gridlock in the paddock stems exactly from that paradox. The teams operating near the bottom of the cost cap simply cannot afford to divert precious engineering hours and budget towards sudden engine compliance.
Yeah.
The tragic irony here is that the midfield teams, who are often the most exposed to these sudden speed differentials in the middle of a chaotic pack.
Because they're in traffic all the time.
Exactly. They are the least equipped financially to wake up to a major rule change.
I saw something in the regulations about a safety net called ADUO, Additional Development and Upgrade Opportunities. Isn't that explicitly meant to help manufacturers who get the engine completely wrong or need to make critical updates? Why can't they just use that?
Well, €80 exists, but it fails mechanically in this context. It allows for some extra dyno time and a slight bit of cost cap relief if an engine is proven to be significantly underpowered. But the assessment for ADUO only triggers after several races have actually been run in the season.
Oh, so they have to race the flawed engines first.
Right. By the time a manufacturer is granted those allowances, we are already talking about May or June. Factor in the 6 to 8 month lead time to cast and validate new engine parts, and you are introducing a fix for the next season.
Unbelievable.
The early competitive advantage is already locked in, and the safety issue remains on track for the entire current year.
So what does this all mean for the immediate future? We have emergency summits happening. With safety on the line, budgets maxed out, and time running out, what is the actual path forward through this standoff?
To understand the path forward, you really have to look at the massive disparity between the manufacturers. Not everyone is suffering equally from this super clipping phenomenon.
Right, someone always figures it out.
Exactly. Some manufacturers, particularly Mercedes, according to our sources, appear to have mastered the complexities of the current software and energy recovery rules much better than others.
So from a ruthless competitive standpoint, if I'm Mercedes and I nailed the regulations, why would I ever vote to change the rules? Even if another team's driver is crashing at 50 Gs, I'd just tell the other teams they should have built a better car.
And that is a very real stance in the paddock right now. They have absolutely no incentive to agree to technical changes that would erase their hard-earned advantage. Furthermore, we cannot forget about the customer teams.
Yeah.
A team like McLaren or Williams buys their engines from Mercedes. Their entire chassis, their aerodynamic philosophy, their gearbox casing, it is all built around the exact dimensions and cooling requirements of that specific engine.
Right. If the FIA forces an engine redesign to fix the battery issue and the cooling requirements change, the works team passes that new engine down to the customer team.
And the customer team have to deal with it.
Suddenly, a customer team like Williams finds that their $15 million side pod development is completely useless. They have to redesign their bodywork mid-season, which burns through their aerodynamic cost cap.
It creates a massive domino effect.
They call it-
Fixing an engine safety issue plunges half the grid into chassis cost cap breaches.
Which raises an important question about the governance of Formula One. To actually solve this, to fundamentally change that core 50-50 energy split and remove the reliance on the MGUK harvesting on the straights, F1 needs unanimous agreement from the teams and manufacturers, right?
Yes, unanimous.
But getting unanimous agreement seems impossible. The major automotive manufacturers, especially the new ones coming in like Audi and Ford, they agreed to join F1 specifically because of that 50-50 electric formula.
That was the whole draw.
Right, they invested billions to market their future road cars based on this exact 2026 technology. They aren't going to willingly abandon the core electric architecture just because it's difficult to manage on track.
Exactly. The sport leveraged that specific formula to bait massive automotive giants into the series. If F1 changes the foundation of the regulations now, it is a massive breach of trust with the very boardrooms that fund the sport.
It is a staggering situation. If you look at the big picture, Formula One is currently trapped between a genuine, undeniable safety crisis and an inescapable financial straitjacket.
That sums it up perfectly.
The sport desperately needs to diffuse the superclipping issue before we see more 50G impacts on the straights. But doing so risks either slowing the pinnacle of motorsport down to embarrassing Formula 2 speeds or plunging the entire grid into massive cost cap violations and political warfare over mid-season redesigns.
It is a regulatory dead end. But, there is a final thought worth pondering here, one that steps outside the immediate panic of the paddock and looks at the real world.
Okay, what is it?
The entire 2026 regulation set was designed to mimic the global automotive push toward hybrid electric consumer vehicles. That was the big selling point. But if the absolute greatest engineering minds in the world, backed by $130 million budgets and limitless computational power, cannot figure out how to keep a battery from dying halfway down a straightaway without causing a high-speed crash.
Wow.
What does that tell us about the current realities and limits of consumer EV technology that these race cars are supposed to be pioneering?
That is a fascinating takeaway. We started this deep dive talking about the expectation of absolute precision in Formula One. But it turns out, when you force massive technological innovation through the rigid filter of a cost cap, you don't get precision. You get a highway where the fast lane suddenly turns into a parking lot and nobody has any brake lights. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and keep questioning the mechanics behind the headlines.